How do you think about churn? And is there a scientific way to combat churn?
I think it's kind of like when you're riding a motorcycle, what is the first thing they teach you is like, don't look at the wall. And I think that oftentimes the big 4-letter word in startup ecosystem is churn. And I think the problem is when you think about churn as your main focus, it ends up thinking about the opposite, which is actually what you really should be thinking about, which is loyalty. So loyalty is, the way I measure it, is net revenue retention, which is not just how do we avoid churn, but rather how do we get more loyalty from each existing cohort. Every 3% increase in net revenue retention doubles a company's valuation.
Okay, can you define net revenue?
So for a singular cohort, so let's say January, all of your customers in January, if you have 10% monthly churn, that means in February, they will spend 90% of what they spent in January. That's 10% churn. Or the opposite is net revenue retention, which means that that cohort actually spends more with you in February than they did in January. A good example of that is like Slack. You sign up reluctantly to Slack, and then you pay for it. And then all of a sudden, well, you add more contractors, you add more features. And so in January to February, you start spending more as your usage increases. You've created loyalty. AWS is another example. Snowflake is probably the company that's doing it the best right now. And if you can think about net revenue retention more than anything else, that singular KPI, more than any other KPI, is going to drastically increase your company's valuation. It's going to make it much easier for you to grow your business over time. And it's going to make it much easier for you to exit 5, 10 years down the road when you're ready to move on to your next thing.